thank you so much for joining Give God 90 Radio on Demand. My name is Jerry Mitchell, your host for Give God 90. It is a pleasure to have you join me as we continue in this mini-series, I guess you could call it, as we look at recognizing evil, recognizing sin, and today specifically looking at ourselves and being able to recognize whether we are acting sinfully or whether we are acting with evil intent or whether we're simply making bad decisions. All of that hopefully will help you be able to improve your life because you're going to be able to look at yourself and say, well, I should or shouldn't be able to, or I should or shouldn't be doing whatever action it is you might be or not be doing, right? If, we have that constant reminder in our minds that we should or shouldn't be doing something, and we have a standard set where that comes from, we can always be checking ourselves, because that's where it really starts. It has to start from us, and it reaches outward towards others. Because if we're not honest with ourselves, we can't be honest with other people. We have an ever-growing number of listeners to this podcast and even our live that we do on Thursdays. And because of that, I want to remind you, for our new people, you can download the Give God 90 app. It's absolutely free. It doesn't cost you anything. It takes less than a minute to download. Gives you access to all of the archives that we have on Spreaker, all of our podcasts in the past. That's basically all it does. Is, it just gives you the access. You can set it up so that you when we do go live on Thursdays, you're notified. When these are released on Mondays, you're notified. So it's there for you. Use it. A lot of people do. They really like it. They enjoy it. Also gives you the opportunity to download these, take them with you. You can download them and send. There are people who are downloading these and actually manipulating, cutting them up, and sending them places where they otherwise wouldn't be allowed to go. So, there are folks doing that, and I appreciate you sending this around the world. And I don't take that responsibility lightly. Trust me, I try to be very, very careful with what I say. So, that you are able to continue to do that, and it is able to be put places quite often that something like this wouldn't be able to be put. Okay. Today I want to looking at ourselves. And I want to start with, bad decisions. We all make bad decisions. Sometimes, I do something, and I'll be honest with you, I have to think, why was I that stupid? And I call myself that. I do. How could I be so dumb as to do something? And I thought of this example a little earlier. Let's put ourselves in a situation, and bear with me, because I think many people have done this. Okay, if you are having a meal, and you're finished with the meal, you're full, you're content, but you look, and there for dessert is maybe your favorite piece of pie, maybe it's a cake, maybe whatever your favorite dessert may be, there it is. Now, I have a couple. Okay, I'll be honest with you. I have a couple favorites that I have a really, really hard time passing up. I'm not. I don't have any health issues. I'm not diabetic or anything like that, so I can eat the sugary stuff, even though I try to avoid it. Notice I said try to avoid it. You can't always do that. But let's say, for sake of argument here, that we have just eaten a nice meal. You're perfectly content. You're not hungry. You really don't want anything else. But you look, and there is, maybe it's a piece of pie. Think of your favorite pie, your favorite pastry, whatever it might be. And it's a nice, big, chunk. I mean a huge chunk of this. I've been in restaurants and I've looked in their dessert cases and I see, like these big 9-inch pies that are cut in quarters, and they might be 8 inches deep, with all that meringue and everything on top, and they just look so scrumptious and so good, and it's like, oh yeah, I got to have one of them. But really, you don't have to have one of those. You want one, but you don't need one. And that's what I want to get at here. Because after a good meal and you're content, you look at that pie and you say, man, I'm not really hungry, but that looks good. And you don't force it down, it goes down willingly. And with every forkful or every spoonful, every bite of it, that you're going to feel miserable in just a few minutes. But you don't stop, you keep going, don't you? That's not sinful, that's really not gluttony. It's not evil, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But what it really is you're making a bad decision. It's a bad decision emotionally, because you feel bad when you do it. Because with every bite, you feel bad. You know that you shouldn't be doing it. You know that it's going to make you physically feel not well in a few minutes, right? Physically, you're harming yourself because you're doing things with your digestion and your health that you probably shouldn't be doing. And I'm not against desserts, okay? I'm talking about those great, big, huge honking things that they look good, don't they? That is a bad decision. Currently, we're dealing with my granddaughter, who is 13, who made a bad decision. And we're teaching her that every decision you make in your life has a result that you either are going to enjoy or you're not going to enjoy, right? Some decisions you make, you may enjoy the short-term benefits, like eating that dessert. Oh, it's so tasty and so good going down. The long-term result is you feel bad for a while. Physically, you emotionally carry that, but also, let's face it, folks, in America, we have a problem with overeating. We indulge way too much, and it expands your waistline. So your long-term results of a bad decision for eating too much dessert too often is you gain too much weight, and it costs you health-wise down the road. Likewise, your short-term decisions, that was so good going down. But with every bite of that dessert, you shouldn't be doing it. Not as often as you probably are. Right? And I'm using this example because that is probably the best example for the most wide range group of people. Okay? So the short-term enjoyment is very limited, but the long-term consequences may be lasting not just for a couple of hours, they may last into your advanced years, let's just say it that way. Not from eating just one dessert, but the bad decisions you make time after time after time, those are the ones that add up, aren't they? Now, that's not being sinful, it's not being evil, it's just making bad decisions. You're making your decisions based on what you want right now. You're not making your decisions based on what's best for you later. Because if you made every decision based on what's best for you later, chances are you'd be in pretty good shape, right? I mean, health-wise, you would be healthy. Emotionally, spiritually, you would be healthy. But not everybody does that. People make bad decisions all the time. It's just that simple. Now, let's go from that to sin. And sin, of course, is very easy to understand if you know the biblical definition of sin. which is found in 1 John 3:4, where it says sin is a violation of God's instructions. When our Creator gives you His instructions, whether they are found throughout the first 5 books of Moses or whether they are found in your own personal relationship where He may be giving you something to do and you want to avoid it like Jonah did, right? That's sin. That's not evil. It's not a bad decision. You're conscious of what you're doing. You just don't want to follow His instructions. That is flat out blatant sin. That is the biblical definition. You are going against what your Creator is instructing you to do. That one's easy. Evil is not so easy. Evil is an action that has certain results. And these certain results of evil can, well, let's just say you won't like it in the long term, all right? And that's what we need to concentrate on for right now. Now, we know that trying to define evil is kind of like describing, and I used this analogy before, it's kind of like describing how to run to a fish, right? You have to see it in order to really understand it. But Solomon, in all of his wisdom, actually kind of brings it down to one thing here. And if we look in Proverbs 1, beginning in verse 10, it starts out by saying, "My son, if sinners entice you, don't give in." Suppose they say, "Come with us, we will lie in wait for blood. Let's ambush the innocent for no reason. We'll swallow them alive, still healthy as they go down to the pit of Sheol, the pit of death. We find all sorts of valuable things. We'll fill our homes with their loot. Throw your lot in with us. We'll all have one wallet." Right? They're going to pool all their resources. Verse 15. "My son, don't go with them. Keep your foot from their path, for their feet run to evil." Now, what's all that have to do with what I'm saying? When we recognize evil, the best description, and it describes many, many, many different actions in many, many, many different ways. But the best description for evil is when someone or something entices you away from your Creator. Let me say that again. When someone or something entices you away from your Creator. Now, can an inanimate object, a thing, in and of itself be evil? No, it can't. A book is a book. It doesn't really, no matter what it contains in it, it's still just a book. It's a thing. But it is how you choose to use it, which is where the self-examination comes in, if we can use that term. It's very, very easy to see, well, that person is enticing someone to do something wrong. He is really attempting to drive a wedge between, the other person and their Creator. That is a good example of evil. He's enticing someone away from following the instructions of their Creator. When that person actually does it, that's sin, but the enticement is the evil aspect. When the serpent spoke to Eve, he was enticing Eve, right, to question her Creator. And she followed suit, right? Today we look at it and we say, well, this person may be trying to get someone, maybe it is to rob and pillage and steal. Maybe it's to get them to take some illicit drug. Maybe it's to make them question a parent or make them question someone else in authority, right? Maybe it even goes so far as to convince someone to commit murder, right? Killing someone without just cause. But when we look at ourselves, okay, when I say self-examination here, can your actions in any way be misconstrued or, misinterpreted so that even though it's your best intention is to bring somebody to, know that relationship with the Almighty, are you actually driving them away? Is what you're doing, hammering on them consistently, driving them further away? Sometimes our best intentions are interpreted wrongly. Sometimes we attempt to explain things to people and they don't want to be explained to. I try not to discriminate here at all, but I will discriminate against evil, and I will discriminate against the willfully ignorant. And what I mean by that, I believe it was Peter who said there are those who are willingly ignorant of certain facts. If you recognize certain facts, but you don't want to deal with them, right? That's being willingly or willfully ignorant. I really have a hard time with that. When I make a decision, I want to make my decision based on all of the information. I want to gather it all together. I want to examine it. I want to dig through it. I want to make sure that what I have is correct. On a personal note with that, when my mother was in her last days, the doctors and the nurses and the hospitals and the caregivers were giving us information, and we had to take that information and we had to process that information and make decisions that would affect her last days. And hopefully we made good decisions. Looking back, are there things we could have done differently that, may have given her a little more comfort? Maybe, but quite honestly, we don't know. All we can say is we did the best we could with the information we had at the time. And that is where this self-examination comes in. Are you doing the best you can with all of the information you have available? Sometimes our best intentions, and I need to be careful how I say this, okay? But sometimes our best intentions may not be what the Almighty needs you to deliver to someone. If He's telling you need to just relax with someone and let them be, who they are for a moment, then that's what you need to do. Sometimes He may be saying you need to be more aggressive. Sometimes, and as I'm working on another project here concerning grief, and this has been an ongoing project for me for about 6 or 8 months now. Let's be realistic here. There are times when somebody who has lost someone close to them, they need to express their relationship to that person. They need to express their memories of that person. But there are times when that whoever is going through this moment of grief, they need to hear other people's relationship to that lost person. Okay? They need to hear, that a friend, maybe they were playing golf together often. Maybe they were going for coffee often. Maybe, and sometimes what they need to hear is someone asked, can I share with you a memory that I have about this? Sometimes our best intentions, though, as we know it, might be, oh, I got to tell you. No, you don't got to tell them. What you're doing, what you should be doing, is asking if they're ready to hear that memory. Our best intentions sometimes can be misinterpreted. We do the same thing when we're trying to witness to people. And I have heard this from many, many people. Well, they just need Jesus. They just need Jesus in their life. They got to get you. Okay. I'm done hammering on the church for a moment. I want to talk about that individual that does that. They don't understand the situation. They don't know how to express what they're saying. Okay? That's the whole basis in a nutshell. Primarily because who the Messiah is was never explained to them. How that whole relationship works they don't have a concept of it. Simply under knowing someone doesn't mean that you are friends with them. It doesn't mean you have a relationship with them. It means you know them. You might just wave going down the street. Sometimes you might even stop and speak to them for a moment, but you don't really have a working type relationship. You talk about, the light little fluffy stuff, but you don't have that in-depth relationship. That's what needs to be explained to these folks who, they just need Jesus in their life. Well, maybe. But maybe what they really need, maybe they have Jesus in their life, but maybe they need to understand how that relationship works. Maybe the person who said that needs to understand how the relationship works. Is it possible that your actions in that situation, and I know I need to be careful because there's probably somebody out there who has said this, but is it possible that your actions and your aggressiveness, instead of bringing that person closer to a relationship with the Almighty, has actually done just the opposite? Even though you're trying to show, I'm going to put this in modern Christian terms. Even though you're trying to express the love of the Savior, okay? Is your aggressiveness towards that other person, trying to force it on them, actually enticing them away from the Almighty? At that point, it can be said that your actions are evil. So we need to be very, very careful and self-examine consistently. Is the short-term satisfaction worth the long-term result? Or maybe we should just relax a little bit, follow the Almighty's instructions that He's giving to us, be open and willing that whoever we may be speaking to might not be ready to hear from us. Maybe they're watching us to see what we do, to see that we are not hypocritical in our actions, to see that our witness is only concerned with bringing glory to the Almighty and not to ourselves. That's what we need to be consistently looking for in this self-examination. Yes, we're going to make bad decisions. Yes, we're going to make mistakes. Yes, sometimes we might even inadvertently sin. What we really, really, really need to be on the lookout for, especially in ourselves, is, are we the ones who are preventing someone else from having that relationship they need with their Creator. That's what we need to be careful of. That's what we need to be watchful for. The last thing I want someone to say is, "You're evil." But it's also the first thing I want someone to say, if they really understand what evil is and they know what evil can result in, and if they're able to look at me and say, "Your actions have just taken someone away from their Creator," when I'm worked for the last how many years now to bring people closer to that relationship, getting people to improve their lives by following His instructions, making sure that they have every blessing that the Almighty wants to give them in their life, trying to convince people how much better your life can be if you will simply live the way that your Creator designed you to live. That's why sometimes, I get very, 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 very in-depth in the definitions that we use, because, I want you to understand exactly what these words mean and how we use them. I said before, language evolves, and it does. Words don't mean the same thing today quite often that they meant, 70, 80, 90 years ago. Best example is the word cool. Today we say, "Oh, that's cool," meaning it's good, it's okay. 100 years ago, if you said it's cool, somebody's going to look, especially if you say it around here, mid-Atlantic region in July, if you say it's cool, people are going to look at you and go, "You're crazy." It's just that simple. Because back then, the language of cool meant it was chilly, it was cold. Cool has evolved. So we need to be very careful with our definitions. We need to be very careful. That's why I really get into these definitions. I really try to make sure you understand exactly what I'm saying. And I spend a lot of time doing that, I know, but it's important because I don't want someone to misinterpret something I'm saying, especially when it's this important. We've got to be willing to do that self-examination. And we've got to be open when someone else looks at us and says, that was a really bad decision. Or when someone looks at us and says, I'm not sure, but I think you might want to reconsider whatever it was that they did in their presence. And we certainly need to be open to the people who come to us and say, I know you mean well, but you just need to not hammer me about this. Because sometimes it's not our message to deliver. Sometimes we're not, to put it in biblical terms, we are not always the angel. We're not always the messenger that person needs to hear from. The Almighty's probably already sent somebody else or has somebody in mind to go, and when that person's ready to hear and they're willing to listen, that's when they'll receive the message. We're not salesmen for the Almighty. He doesn't need salesmen. He needs people who are out there willing to live the way they are designed to live so that everyone else can look at us and say, I don't know what it is about them, but I want what they got. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope this has been a blessing for you. I hope that this explanation of evil and sin and just plain bad decisions has really given you something to think about, because it is something that doesn't need to be in the back of our minds. It needs to be in the front of our minds. With all of that being said, I hope that you have a blessed week.